It's almost like a game of footy.
Yeah.
In that first quarter, you're probing, you're finding out, you're doing your homework, you're testing. If you think of the first quarter in footy, you're working, you're looking
at your weakness.
You're looking at the opposition, you're going, will we attack there? Will we go there? What do I need to know about that?
Yeah.
And that second quarter, well, you've now worked out you're in the industry, so now what do I do? Okay, then I've got to make this thing work. How do I make it work? These are all the tools I need, and this is how I deliver them. You get into the third quarter, okay, now how do I max this? I've spent all that money. I spent those 2 years learning. This is how I got to max it. And then your fourth quarter is your real strategy. How do I stay? Do I get out? Do I buy another one?
How do you finish?
How do I finish? What's my exit strategy?
Yeah.
So the biggest thing when people come into the industry is they balk at that last final step of getting that training knowledge, that induction knowledge.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing.
Mike O'Farrell from MLR Services, thank you for joining me today. I'm pretty excited about today's discussion with you. Obviously, you've been in the industry, I think, since, 1991, thereabouts, early 90s. You have a foundation and a fundamental role in management rights, MLR Services. Tell us a bit about when you started to where the industry is now, and what have you seen, how have you seen the industry evolve?
Look, the industry is evolved hugely, as we all know. I started on the Gold Coast, which was the centre of the world in terms of management rights. It was pretty well restricted to the coast in those days. We were very much mum and dad operators, and you almost had to be anointed to go on to the next building.
Right.
There was a rat pack led by a couple of lawyers, bankers, real estate agents, brokers, and a couple of operators. And if you didn't get the tap on the shoulder, then you were virtually told to get out. And there was a great man that founded Body Corporate Services called Howard Stewart, and he was the shoulder tapper. And so if you weren't good for the industry, then, you were told well and truly to pack your bags and get out.
Yeah.
Because the industry self-governed itself. It was very, very conscious of how we appeared, and very conscious of the fact that as a manager, you had to take control of your scheme. So in those days, when you promoted your business, particularly in short-term holiday, you went away as a group. I hooked up with what was called the Big Four. So there were four of us. We had similar interests. We were the same age. And we would go away and promote. So you go to Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, New Zealand, and promote your business. And in doing so, promote the Gold Coast. In those days also, you didn't get bookings that were done like they are today, where people decide, I'm going to go to Brisbane.
Yeah.
You jump on your phone and you make a booking because you can.
Yep.
The IT is there. In those days, there was a lot of phone work.
Right.
You might give out 20 or 30 quotes in a week.
Yeah.
So Sundays, traditionally Sunday morning, you would get on the phone and ring all those clients back and how you going? Have you made a decision yet? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that's how you kind of did business. And then you got your business from the wholesalers. You had Qantas, you had Ansett, you had Sun Lover Holidays, these sorts of wholesalers. They took their hefty cut, up to 35%. And then you looked after those guests when they came through. You had these incredibly terrible things called allotments or allocations, where you had to hold so many units, for the wholesalers. So these days, of course, none of that exists. The mum and dad operator, they're now kind of restricted probably to the smaller schemes, and particularly you've seen it on the coast and now certainly in Brisbane, and you're seeing a lot more of it now on the sunny coast where the corporates are getting into the business, large corporates, and they'll have booking streams, and you deal with these lovely things now called OTAs, online travel agents. You're continually watching a screen. If you're short-term letting, you're continually watching a screen against your competitors and you're moving rates all the time.
Dynamic pricing.
Dynamic pricing, correct. I mean, in one of our businesses, we have a dedicated person virtually that does that. That's his job. Sits there all day and does that.
Interesting. We've certainly seen the industry evolve a lot in your time, and I think you can hand up on your heart saying, right, well, online marketing, media, you're throwing a COVID there. Operators have had to adapt and be progressive with the times, right? What inspired you to form MLR Services, Mike?
There was a period there pre-COVID where there were a lot of new entrants came in the industry, particularly in southeast Brisbane, and they were sold virtually a visa, and they were sold that the industry was a silent investment and a tick and a flick, and you got paid your money every month, and that was it. They were selling kind of there's no work in this industry. You get into it and you sit back and away you go. Lifestyle. Yeah. Whereas the exact opposite. And I was sitting on the board of Orama, and we were hearing this and getting inundated with horror stories, complaints. The board recognised that this was not good for the industry. And that's kind of, if you remember back to what I said in the early days, the industry has always looked out to make sure that it protects itself from that manager that gives us a bad name, because that's our one and only thing that we've got going for us, to fight the naysayers and the non-believers of management rights. Yeah. The fact that, we are an integral part of the industry, and we do a good job, and we're worthy of doing that. So we had a lot of new entrants coming into the industry, and they weren't good. And I had previously done some consulting in between buildings and so on. So I said to the board, look, I'm going to get back into consulting. I saw it as a conflict of interest, still sitting on the board and going out consulting. It was an interesting period. Yeah. A lot of people on the board said, no, don't get off the board. But I didn't feel comfortable with that. So I went out and formed MLR. Mm-hmm. I didn't make any phone calls. I didn't do any advertising. I built a website. I think it's still there. Yeah. Although we're just about to change some of that. And next thing, wow, the phone started ringing, and it's been kind of ringing ever since. Yeah. So that, and now with other people now that have seen possibly what we're doing, there's competitors coming into the industry, so we need to reinvent and regrow. Yeah. But basically, I haven't gone away from the original idea, which was to help managers, help bodies corporate, help that triangle of management that, I teach as much as I can, unravel my chops about it as much as I can.
No, that's it. Some of the, obviously, you must see a full spectrum of the industry, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mm. Unfortunately, like most industries, there's always going to be the unsavoury and the stuff that you want to focus on, you need to put your attention on and work through. Some of the common disputes that you might come across, are they avoidable?
Look, they are avoidable if people take the time to sit down and be sensible. Yeah. What is being sensible? And unfortunately, a lot of the cases I get involved in, it's gone too far. Right. If I can get involved in a case early on where you can get a sensible committee and a sensible manager and everybody's looking for an outcome, fantastic, happy day.
So let's just touch on that. How early is early or early enough?
Virtually. If the moment there's an issue, the problem is, Sid, that, and you see it all the time, a lot of our agreements were written back in the early 2000s, some of them back in the 90s, and they were very generic. There's particular developers that had in-house lawyers, and, you'd grab that one and change the name of the scheme, and there's your agreement.
Cookie cutter model.
Okay, that's it. A lot of lawyers did that too, by the way, and that's not good. And schemes change. Something that was 20 years old, I've seen schemes where, all of a sudden the tennis court's in there, or an extra pool, or an extra basketball court or something, and it's not costed in.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing that's changed is people's expectations, particularly following COVID, are much higher, and costs have gone through the roof. And bodies corporate are looking for more bang for their buck, so that pressure comes back onto management.
Yeah.
There's also this other thing about what is a minor job compared to what's a specialist job.
Yeah.
You look at me, you look at those hands.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't hammer a nail. Never have been able to.
Yeah.
Whereas you get some guys that are great handyman, and they can do that. So if I'm buying a scheme from a particular manager that was very, very good at, going around and touching up and doing those bits and pieces, I'm in abject failure. The biggest issue we're facing in this industry is the agreements.
Right.
It's the lack of the agreements being concise, well costed, well thought out, with a set of duties that everybody's happy with, and it can be reviewed periodically because schemes change.
Yeah. And what's the Band-Aid or the quick fix solution to someone looking to buy a business? They look at their caretaking agreement, doing their own personal due diligence, and go, well, it says I've got to maintain a spa, but this scheme doesn't even have a spa. What's the quick fix for someone entering the industry and picking up these discrepancies?
In my opinion, you've got to get it changed there and then.
Right.
If you don't change an agreement before that magical settlement date, then something's wrong with that agreement, then I think you're in trouble.
Wow.
And this is why you notice yourself.
Yeah.
Brokers these days are much better at getting a set of agreements and saying, hang on, we're going to have trouble here. So you can condition your vendor accordingly. That, look, this is not going to fly in the market. We've got this issue, that issue, that issue. Now, ideally, if I can get involved there and then you can solve a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
There's always been this reluctance to tell a committee when you want to sell. I don't always harbour that thought. I think you have to involve the committee.
Yeah.
I think it's a golden opportunity to say to your committee, hey, I am a business. Yes, I possibly may be for sale.
Yeah. If
I was to go to market, these are the problems I've recognised with the agreement.
From my point of view, in the coalface daily, there's a lot of animosity there between an operator, an owner that lives in there that has to share the lift with a community member, has to put on a brave face when they're mowing the lawns and everyone's looking at how manicured the gardens are, to then go around and say, oh, geez, I don't want them knowing that I'm looking to take my business to market. How do you approach that and educate that operator looking to get out and say, right, is your philosophy the best honesty policy where you've got to be upfront and forthcoming, but at what stage do they have that conversation?
I think lots of bodies corporate right at the assignment stage will ask an operator, what's your intended life?
Yeah.
Or along the way they might say, oh, we hear that you might be selling.
Yeah.
Look, the stock standard of that is it's a business. That's what it is. The business operates around some very basic rules. One of those is obviously a relationship. That's probably the top of the tree. So you've got to be confident enough to say, to the committee and to owners, I am a business, and at some stage someone might walk through that gate and want to buy this business.
Yeah.
And I have to assess that for whatever reasons at the time.
Yeah. And if they potentially do react in a negative manner, how do you overcome that when you're trapped there as your business owner? Well,
I find that if you're straight up front and you're as truthful as you can be with a committee, I mean, I'm not saying tell them every
detail,
nitty-gritty, but you've certainly got to talk at that high level at all times.
Yeah.
You've got to say, yes, I do have a plan. Yes, our structure is geared towards staying a certain period of time, but we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. We don't know. Industry might change. I might get crook. family who might be crook. We don't know, so you need to understand at all times, that there is a possibility that one day I might have to come and say, we're looking at selling.
Yeah.
But if we do, we will be making sure with everything within our power that the buyer that comes in is a buyer that you're going to be incredibly happy with.
Yeah.
Because we've set this thing up this way and we've done that and we've done this and we've done that.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's ever any argument that, unless it's very, very extenuating circumstances, that you should not be talking to your body corporate along those lines all the way.
Yeah, right.
You never ever blindside a committee.
Yeah.
It's like I say about top-ups, said, never get out of bed this morning and go, I got to have my motion in a week's time. I think I'll go and get a top-up. You
may laugh, but I see it all the time.
Look, even I start 18 months out.
Yeah.
We've got a management rights, one particular one. I said to the chairman 18 months ago, we're going to go for a top-up in 2025.
Yeah. Mike, I've before you coming on today, I had a look at your website. You referred to it earlier, and on there you mentioned B for B. What is B for B?
B for B is a magnificent acronym. Mm-hmm. Best for building or scheme.
Yeah.
B for B, B for S. So basically go back to that triangle. So in that triangle, if I had a whiteboard, I'd show you. I'm a great whiteboard man, old school. But basically in the 3 points you have the body corporate, which is represented by the committee. Yeah. You have the body corporate manager and you have the building manager. And we're all joined. Yeah. Everyone's joined. You have a fracture anywhere in those lines, you'll have dispute. Mm-hmm. And at times you do. Yeah. At times you do. So what that group has to do is remember, they're not there for their own personal reasons. They're there for the building or the scheme. Mm-hmm. And that's why I always go back to best for building. Yeah. What is the best for the scheme? Yeah. Look, we might be arguing about the colour, or we might be arguing whether we fix the delamination or this or that or whatever. We've got to understand that it's the building that keeps us all together. That's why we're there. Yeah. And that's why I always go back to best for building. If I'm sitting there with a committee and a manager and we're locked in some sort of dispute, then I'll always, where's the whiteboard? Yeah. Chum, chum, chum. Yeah. Yeah. Best for building. Yeah. Come on, guys, that's why we're here.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the good, the bad, the ugly, sometimes mediation's required. Mm-hmm. Your approach on mediation, is it best to sort of, procrastinate, dwell, or is it best just to hit them between the eyes with the right information, or come pre-prepared to work out a scenario that everyone's happy and it's going to be viable?
Look, every mediation will be different. Yeah. I've sat in very formal mediations, where there's been a formally appointed mediator, mm-hmm. and you'll have the committee down one side and you'll be down the other side with the manager. Yeah. I've been that person as well that's mediated.
It's a little bit hostile.
Oh, they can be. Yeah. Yeah. I remember one of the very first mediations I did, very formal mediation, where we had a very formal mediator up the front. Yeah. And my manager had a very short week. Right. And I schooled him uphill, down dale for 1 hour before this mediation that he was not to say anything, he wasn't to do any talking, and he was certainly not to come out of the chair and display any aggression whatsoever. Right. Okay. He had to sit back with his hands on his knees, and if he did anything different, I would whack him. Okay. Where I think we're 5 minutes into this mediation and I'm out of the chair and into it.
Would it be fair to say that characteristic may not be sort of fitted to the industry, where if you're not a people person, perhaps you should consider your options before you're going into management rights?
I'm locked in a mediation, conciliation, whatever you want to call it at the moment, where we have a very, very square peg in a round hole. Right. Our manager is he's a shocker.
Tell us how you really feel, Mike. Yeah.
Look, he is, and I first time I met him, I said, we need to get you out. Yeah. We need to get you out of this particular scheme.
Right. Okay.
The scheme is townhouse style development. Mm-hmm. It's an older demographic. And you can't treat older people like that. You know, older people, you can't even treat younger people like that, you know, but it was a particular demographic where they had been used to a particular management style, and it was totally turned around, totally different.
Yeah.
And this committee and the entire scheme was at the stage where they were going to start issuing RANs and breach notices and goodness knows whatnot. So fortunately, I got involved. I met the manager. I then organised a meeting with the committee. I met the chairperson, the treasurer, and the body corporate manager. And we nutted out, you know, a process. And the process involved setting the business up so we could sell the manager out. And we're very well advanced in that. It was a very bad agreement, once again lacking in, you know, specifics, lacking in frequency, very open to interpretation, on a ratchet scale for not just CPI but plus.
Yep.
So, you know, continually going up each year, fantastic arrangement, but the body corporate possibly wasn't getting the bang for its buck.
Yep.
So in that particular case, you're involved relatively early. You're involved before the RANs start flying.
Okay.
If I have to get involved, which is a lot of the cases where the breaches have been issued, then it's very, very difficult to recover because you have warring parties and you've got lawyers involved.
Yep.
And with all due respect to our lawyers, the moment the lawyers are involved,
yep.
you know, it can be ka-chink, ka-chink.
Yep.
And if you have a very aggressive body corporate and they have a very aggressive lawyer and you're going down the path of, say, a termination vote, that's very difficult to reverse that.
Mike, where does the majority of your work inquiry come from as a consultant? Does it come from the operator, incumbent operator, having issues? Does it come from the committee or strata, or does it come from third-party professional referrers? Where do you get the most requirement of your time to sort of understand and try and mitigate a solution?
I get referrals from all over.
Yeah.
And probably people see me, without having too much of an ego trip, but probably people see me as the type of person that can go in and talk to all sides.
Yeah.
I'm a great believer in compromise. You know, all my life I've sought compromise. Yeah. So I can go in and conciliate. Hopefully I'm very well briefed. I can read an agreement. Yeah. I can very quickly get my head around a scheme. I've seen hundreds of them. Yeah. And I understand very clearly, generally sitting across the table, you can sum someone up very quickly. So the bulk of my call is to conciliate, go in.
So from operators that are wanting how we get out myself out of this?
Operators, professionals. I'm getting body corporate managers contacting me. I'm getting committees ringing me. Yeah. So I found it very difficult to be engaged by a committee. Yeah. And I'll always say to a committee, I'm very, very happy to work with you, but I'm working on the basis of that we're going to solve the issue for the building or for the scheme.
Right.
Back to the best for building. Yeah. I'm not going to ever work against a manager. I will say if I have a manager or I think a manager is either not a member of ARAMA and or is giving the industry a bad name, I have no compunction in saying to that manager.
Let's go back and on that topic, and there's a continuous theme throughout the conversations we have on a day-to-day basis, but also the guests I've had in the Broker's Boardroom. ARAMA, you know, obviously they're a peak body. They're there to protect the industry and obviously uphold the industry values. How does your role sort of work, you know, with the values of ARAMA and obviously, you know, the importance of, you know, being proactive or reactive in a situation with the skill set you have?
Well, I can put my hand up and say that I'm probably one of the longest serving members of our peak industry body. I was originally QRAMA, which became ARAMA. I was on the inaugural board. ARAMA to me is it. It's the be all and the end all. If you're in the industry and you're not aligned or a member of ARAMA, then I'm very, very, very critical of you. When I hear people say to me, "Oh, I'm not joining ARAMA. What's in it for me?" You know, they don't help me. Well, the reality is we wouldn't have an industry if it wasn't for ARAMA. So the big thing about ARAMA is that it bats hugely above its weight. We're not a rich body. We don't have huge numbers of staff. We can't afford it. And we try to keep the fees, accordingly low. But the recent thing we just went through with the review and the attack on term and the attack from naysayers against our model, that was real.
Yeah.
They were very, very, very real. Yeah. And what the industry did to combat that was incredible, fantastic.
Yeah.
The industry gathered funds, we lobbied, we wrote submissions, we were very, very proactive in that process. And as a result, we still have an industry.
Yeah.
At one stage, we were facing...
It's hard to believe, isn't it? It's hard to believe that they had to come to that,
Well, I tell you what, I'm not going to dramatise it, but it was very, 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 very close.
Yeah.
So I have no time for anybody that doesn't put their hand up and say, I'm not going to be a member of the industry body.
Yeah.
You have to be a member of the industry body.
I think it's important that we talk and shed light onto those, probably the darker side of our industry that unfortunately occurs. But it is more so important to understand, how important the framework is, and it's there to support operators and it's there to support the industry for the better. Give some insight for someone coming into the industry for the first time, a bit of what they can expect or what they should probably focus their time and energy on to set themselves up for success.
Look, the big thing is education. God gave us two of these, one of those. I always use the analogy when I got into this industry, I had a tongue that long. Now it's that long, But you've got to be learning all the time.
Yeah.
You've got to understand your scheme. You've got to be the one-stop shop. I regard a committee, they should be like the board.
Yeah.
And what do you do with the board? If you're a CEO or a manager, you take it up to the board. In other words, you research it, you find out all about it, you gather the quotes, and you take it to the board. And you have respect for the board, and you respect the board that they will make a decision. And that's how you should. That's how you should treat it. So the biggest thing, number one, is education. You've got to know your agreements inside out and backwards. Know your CMS. Know your scheme. You've got to know everything in that scheme and how it operates. And if you do that, then you will become that one stop. Yeah. You got to know the values in your scheme. What are my units selling for? Who's buying them? What's my median rents? What's the guy down the road doing? How come his rents are $20 a week more than mine? How come he has an ADR of this and I only have that?
Yeah.
Why is his occupancy that and mine's that?
Yeah.
What am I doing? Yeah. So you got to understand the market you're dealing in. And you've got to be absolutely at it all the time. You can't just do it on Monday and Tuesday, then go away.
Yeah.
Management rights is a 7-day-a-week job. So the biggest thing that I say to any newbie coming into the industry, just be prepared to work. You've got to work.
Yeah.
If you don't, you won't survive.
Yeah.
But you've got to work smart too, When a lot of new people come into the industry, and I see this in a lot of people, it doesn't matter how much they've had a beautiful due diligence done, they've had a verification done, but then they get in there and go, oh, what do I do now? Yeah. So there's a lot of reliance on the systems that may or may not be in place that you're walking into. Yeah. You've really got to understand that. Now, if they're not in place, then you've got to find someone like me or someone that makes sure that you're set up with the right systems and understand when and how to produce those. Yeah. You've got to understand the committee, how often do they want to meet with you? And that's a question you should be asking at assignment.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you want to see me? How often do you want me to report?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a cup of coffee every Monday, or do you just want to see me at meetings?
Yeah. Yeah.
How high do you want the hedges done? All that's silly stuff, but it's all relevant.
Absolutely.
How do you want the pool to look?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
And when I take people through the assignment process, that's a classic golden opportunity, because the committee will have their questions to ask you, but that's also a golden opportunity for you to ask the committee.
Expectations.
Yeah,
fantastic.
How can I help? How can I improve the scheme?
Yeah.
How do we do this? What do we do that? What's our appetite for this, that?
Yeah.
But someone's got to help you with those questions.
Absolutely. Now, so it leads me to my next question, get a better understanding of, we see this and we hear this all the time, surround yourself with the right people, and if you want a positive impact, have a positive person or someone that knows, that's been there, done it, get them on board. How, as a new entrant, how do you know who to have those people around you when buying your first property? Who do you know to go to and get the right information? Where do you find that?
I think a lot of that comes from that initial ARAMA MRITP course.
Yeah.
The people that deliver at that course are very, very, very good.
I think you're on there, aren't you?
Yeah, that's why I said they're very good.
Yeah.
No, look, if you look across the cross-section of the people that talk at that, they're pros, they're experts. You've got the best lawyers, you got the Office of Fair Trading, you got Commissioner's Office, you got a body corporate manager, and then you've got someone like me that talks about relationships, with the body corporate. And then you've got ARAMA themselves, Trevor, that delivers, an excellent delivery about the industry and how it came about and whatever. So you meet initially, that's where you start meeting people. But then you've got to go to functions. If you're a member of ARAMA, you go to the functions, and you start watching some of those people that talk. You got your John Marnies and your Frank Higginsons and these sort of people that get up there. They're the type of people that you got to listen to and take on board. Yeah. They're the ones. You got your brokers. Yeah. We know there's good and bad brokers. Yep. We know that
absolutely
very, very much. And I think if you align yourself with a really good broking firm, a couple of the majors, then you're half a chance, because then you're going to be introduced to that right lawyer, that right accounting firm, and find your way through to a couple of the experts, the older experts in the industry. Yeah. So that's how you find those people. Yeah.
What do you think would be like a common misconception about someone coming into the industry, or maybe a bit of feedback from someone that's been in the role for about 12 months going, geez, I wish I had have known that. Well, I wish I had have been in contact with that person earlier. What do you think would be something that someone coming into the first industry for the first time, buying a business, would really take away from hearing this today about a bit of lead-in advice before purchasing?
I think the biggest thing is people turn around and spend 1, 2, 3, whatever million buying a business in the management rights industry. These days, it probably costs an extra 6 to 8%, right, maybe add on, possibly even 10, with due diligence, verification, stamp duty and so forth, working capital. Because inevitably, if you buy one of these things, you could be 6 months, 7 months before settlement. So you've got to fund yourself on the way through. Yet then when it turns around to getting some proper training or induction, they balk at spending another $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Yeah. And to me, that's a major mistake initially. If you're going to be successful and you're going to make this industry long term, then you have to invest. Initially, you have to invest in that that program, that path, that journey, for want of a better word. I did a PowerPoint called The Cycle of Life of a management rights operator. Yeah. So it takes people through that 1 hour, the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter. It's almost like a game of footy. Yeah. In that first quarter, you're probing, you're finding out, you're doing your homework, you're testing, if you think of a first quarter in footy,
Yeah.
you know, you're working, you're
Look
looking
at your weakness.
you're looking at the opposition, you're going, will
Yeah.
we attack there? Will we go there?
Yeah.
What do I need to know about that?
Yeah.
And that second quarter, well, you've now worked out you're in the industry, so now what do I do? Okay, then I've got to make this thing work. How do I make it work?
Yeah.
These are all the tools I need,
Yeah.
and this is how I deliver them. You get into the third quarter, okay, now how do I max this? I've spent all that money. I spent those 2 years learning. This is how I got to max it. And then your fourth quarter is your real strategy. How do I stay? Do I get out? Do I buy another one?
How do you finish? Yeah.
How do I finish?
Yeah.
What's my exit strategy?
Yeah.
So the biggest thing when people come into the industry is they balk at that last final step of getting that training knowledge, that induction knowledge.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing.
Yeah.
You give someone a document that thick to read, they won't read it.
Yeah.
They'll get a due diligence report from a lawyer, and they're all saying, fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'll ask someone a question, and they'll go, and I'll say, well, it's in your due diligence, you know, but they haven't read it.
Yeah.
Or if they've read it, they haven't quite grasped what they've read because there's so much for them to read.
Yeah.
So that little extra induction and that extra training goes over the agreement, goes over the CMS, covers the act, talks to them about a body corporate's expectations, you know, from a real layman's point of view.
Mike, I've learned a lot from your wisdom and your words today. I wanted to thank you very much for coming on and sharing your insight. No doubt everyone listening today will take away at least one or two key points. Thank you very much for your time, Mike. Good on you.
Thanks, Sid.
Thank you.